Welcome to this edition of Diligent Institute's Inside Today's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about, are you refreshing your board to meet future strategic challenges? And joining me to have this discussion is Stacie Olivares, who's a board member with KBRA, also was an audit chair of 2 public companies, was the chief investment officer for several large organizations, and served on the board of administration of CalPERS, the largest employee pension fund in this country. So welcome, Stacie.
Thank you for having me, TK.
So refreshment has always been a debatable topic, okay? We've seen, organizations that have been good at it, and unfortunately, most organizations have not been great at refreshment. And when you look at the future, let's start looking at the present. Somebody that is in their late 60s or in their 70s and still sits on the board, never had to really deal with cyber, okay? Certainly didn't have to deal with digital transformation during their career. And what should worry us most is they have no true experience, like most directors, with AI, artificial intelligence, okay? So when a company and a nominating committee looks across its board and they don't have anybody with any of those experiences that can ask the right questions or do something, it should prompt, something in the future to say, we need to recruit people that have this skill set and help. So what is your sort of view on refreshment? And is it a critical issue, or is it something that is overblown, the pressure to refresh your board?
Well, TK, my personal philosophy, and not a philosophy necessarily of any entity that I may represent or have represented, is that good governance requires confidence or builds confidence in capital markets. And especially now with what's happened with the banking crisis, stakeholders want to be confident in the board of directors, and they want to make sure the board has the expertise necessary to carry out oversight of the companies. Part of that is AI. When we look at how artificial intelligence is transforming almost everything around us, what are we doing to look at board composition to make sure that board members have the appropriate expertise? Is there sufficient turnover in tenure so that new board members can join and bring their perspective? And do they have the appropriate capacity? I think the other part of board refreshment is that it's critical to future-proof. So at present right now, we are concerned about artificial intelligence. We are concerned about cyber risk. What's next? Right? Whether it's climate change or some other sudden shock to the market, is the board going to be ready for that? And I think board refreshment is absolutely critical to ensuring that the companies they serve are future-proofed.
When you look at the data, and there's actually a lot of data on whether board members should be replaced. PwC does their big annual study, and that's always one of the features in that. And the number is large. 49% of people feel that there's a board member that should be replaced. So the good news is that most companies do board evaluations. The New York Stock Exchange requires it in their listing requirements. NASDAQ encourages it. So 95% of companies do board evaluations. The problem is not much comes out of those where board leadership has the tough conversation and they replace somebody. So how that has to change, okay? If 49% are saying there should be something replaced, that has to change. So how do you think board leadership can go about doing better at having those tough conversations?
It's about the assessments. So actionable assessments support board effectiveness. It's one thing if a board does a self-evaluation and reports out the results. It's quite another in terms of effectiveness if a third party comes in that's independent, facilitates the board discussion, There is anonymous assessment of the entire board by the board members, of committees, and individual directors. Then, after that assessment, it's looking at the actions that are needed to make sure that the board is effective at managing material risk and at managing growth, as well as stakeholder interests. Is more education needed? Is more training needed? What are the steps needed for each board director to become very effective and guide the corporation appropriately?
So, one of the things that's becoming more popular is sort of the peer-to-peer, where they can do those evaluations. But we still see people having great difficulty having those tough conversations. So, hopefully, there will be enough influence from the outside to make sure that those tough conversations happen. Now, that being said, investors have asked, because they don't see this happening, investors have asked if boards would educate them on what their process is to refresh their board, okay? So sometimes we see it in a proxy. But how would you recommend to boards that they go about, without giving too much information? Okay, you can't give all the inner workings, but how do you believe that boards can go about informing their investors how diligent they are with board refreshment?
I think investors really do want to see what the board's philosophy is and the company's philosophy on where they get their board members, what the criteria are, and what the process is for succession planning. That's often not clearly stated. So if we look at a proxy statement, we might understand how long the board members served and what their background is, if they're a qualified financial expert. But where are these board members being sourced from? Is this just the CEO's personal network or the board's personal network, or are they reaching out to a wide variety of diverse organizations to make sure that the best board talent is actually there? So I think the sourcing information should be disclosed. I also think succession planning policies should be disclosed. So there might be limitations on tenure. There might be some provisions for adding a new board member. But what really is the succession planning that the board has in place to ensure that there's appropriate board composition going forward? We need that to manage material risk.
You know, they used to always say that the NomGov committee was like the softer or the easier, committee to be able to handle this, their duties. Well, this duty is so critical, and the looking at who can be the chairs of the boards, who has the knowledge to cover the strategic issues that this company is going to face, all of a sudden, that sort of board talent becomes one of the most critical issues that a board can face. So I would hope that we would see great improvement going forward, particularly with the scare of AI.
Oh, absolutely. We need to have more board talent focused on artificial intelligence and cyber risk.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. Hopefully, we're going to see some good advancements in this space as time's going. But thank you for joining us, Stacie.
Thank you for having me, TK.
And that will conclude this edition of Diligent Institute's Inside Today's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.